no, of course, I know.
If when you introduce the representative from Cascais, Miguel Pinto,
Yes.
you can tell Cascais is a partner of the policy dialogue.
Yeah.
Because they are.
Okay. But I have to be also quick, right? Because are we a bit behind schedule?
Yeah. Well, no, we are very good in terms of the schedule because it's just 10 minutes, which is very good for usual. But
yeah, I think I will invite. I think I'll make an introduction.
So you will start from the.
So
better, quick.
So how do I present us?
I will introduce the session and give the floor to you.
Okay.
And then you start. I mean, I will not make a description of each of the person.
No.
I will give the floor directly to them. I mean, with the question that you have agreed. And
is there any order in terms of politeness? Or
I will go
order?
first for the members of the Club de Madrid by alphabetic order.
Okay.
Then Mr. Byrne, and at the end, Miguel Pinto. And then is when you can say the city of Cascais.
But I can have 2 minutes, right, to present the report.
Yes, at the beginning, yes. Or at the end, whatever you prefer.
I think it's better in the beginning.
Because no questions from the audience because we are not going to have time.
Okay.
And then we have a back-to-back. And when time is more or less gone, I will come to you and say, all right? Or I will be there, so I can tell you. I mean, no.
But can I go for 2 minutes presenting the report before introducing the panel?
Yes. You can say it. I mean, make the link with the global agenda.
Yes, of course.
And then, of course.
Am I like?
Let's wait for 1 minute for the first. Sorry, we have first the video, okay? Then our second.
So, should I?
No, it would be the first thing. So
Okay.
You can introduce the report, okay? And then before going to the panel, the video, and they are very efficient, but I will let them know that you are going to.
Okay. Just in case.
Because there is no PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Okay. Yes. That's okay. I don't know, Mrs.
Introducing you, you want to mention UNESCO or only saying that you are
Global education.
Global education.
I will explain the link with UNESCO.
So, thank you. So, hello, please take your seats. We are going to start. Welcome to the last sessions of the policy dialogue. The next one is the Plenary 5, a roadmap for policy action. And I would like to introduce you the facilitator of the session, Manos Antoninis. He's the director of the Global Education Monitoring Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for the Club de Madrid for this invitation. We are in this session now on the roadmap. We listened in the previous presentation the items of a global agenda that we need to look forward to. And in this, session, we're actually going to draw on the experience of the policymakers we have in this room and the political leaders to ensure that this global agenda that we're trying to come up with can be designed and promoted to deliver change. So a couple of words about the entity that I represent. Many of you must have seen copies of the Global Education Monitoring Report at the table in front. That was our last report on accountability in education. The report exists since 2001, when it was established as a tool, as an evidence-based tool to monitor education in the international development agenda. We are a report that is editorially independent, but hosted and published by UNESCO. And in 2015, we received from the world's governments a mandate, an official mandate this time, to monitor education in the Sustainable Development Goals. We have a theme in the report every year, and the theme is selected by our advisory board, and one of your members, Helen Clark, is the chair of our advisory board. The reason I'm here is that our forthcoming report is on migration and displacement, and actually, very much linked, our following report, the 2020 report, will be on inclusion. So you'll see why there are links between what we discuss here in the report. The report on migration and displacement is launched on November 20th, and it is officially, the global launch is in Berlin, and we're actually particularly pleased because, as you see, the title of the report is Building Bridges, Not Walls, and that was the slogan that the demonstrators in Berlin last weekend were actually, by coincidence, using. But there would also be other launches in places like Bangkok or Nairobi on the same day. But we launch in more than 80 countries, and we'll be very much looking forward to working with you for joint events that are of interest in your country. The report has the widest possible coverage of migration and displacement. We talk about internal migration, we talk about international migration, both for work but also for education, for professionals, and we talk about displacement, both because of conflict and natural disasters. And we cover issues that have been discussed here. For example, there's a discussion of issues of textbooks. We had a very interesting discussion about Sri Lanka yesterday, how many textbooks actually do discuss conflict resolution. We discussed issues, it was interesting, Finland was saying yesterday that they don't like only praise, they also like to self-criticize, and actually Finland, bizarrely enough, is struggling with the inclusion of migrants and refugees, presumably because of the language that is so complicated. We talk about the right to education of Kyrgyz students and other Central Asian students in the Russian Federation. We talk about Costa Rica. Laura was mentioning yesterday, a very large percentage of immigrants from other parts of the continent. So we have recommendations in the report that may well fit into what the club would like to use. 7 recommendations on how societies can use education as a tool to manage migration and displacement flows. But also we would very much like to benefit from your insights on your agenda for our 2020 report on inclusion. So with this very brief introduction, so that you know where I come from, and I have to say I benefited enormously yesterday from sitting in the Action Lab, listening to policymakers' perspective. We have a policy perspective and a welcome message from the Tibor Navracsics, the Commissioner, EU Commissioner on Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. And following the 2-minute video, we can turn to our panel. Thank you.
Dear President Rebelo de Sousa, dear heads of state, dear members of the Club of Madrid and the Gulbenkian Foundation, dear participants, more and more, and for many different reasons, our nations, our cities, our suburbs look more like an aggregation of groups that live parallel lives. Next to each other, but not together, groups that do not share a common aspiration, a common vision, a common understanding of basic values. A real society needs a common backbone, strong underlying foundations on which a real sense of belonging emerges. It also entails an understanding of diversity and a capacity to accommodate the differences of all its members. This is easier said than done. but the complexity of this challenge shouldn't discourage us from giving appropriate and ambitious answers. That is why this conference is so important and timely. And with the concept of shared societies, you are already providing very pertinent guidance, shared so that we live in societies that are open but not diluted, shared so that we are aware of our rights as citizens, but also our responsibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, learning to be a fully fledged citizen is a complex mix of knowledge and attitudes. It starts in the family and in the classroom. It is about experiencing respect and tolerance for others, as well as feeling proud of one's own culture. It is about learning about our cultural heritage as much as acknowledging our differences. And it is about setting boundaries and agreeing upon founding values. At a time when the integration of migrants remains a challenge, the digital age is testing our resilience to manipulation, and violent radicalization is tearing some communities apart, your discussions are more relevant than ever. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
And with this excellent introductory video, we turn to our speakers. Very briefly, Liam Byrne, Member of Parliament, Saudi Digital Minister from the United Kingdom. Miguel Pinto, Deputy Mayor from the city of Cascais, who is also a partner of this event. Luisa Diogo, Prime Minister of Mozambique. Kjell Magne Bondevik, Prime Minister of Norway. And Mehdi Joma, Prime Minister of Tunisia. So as I mentioned, we start with an open conversation on the opportunities and the challenges ahead in using this agenda to drive policy change. So a first question that I would like Mr. Bondevik to start with would be, in 3-4 minutes, to respond to the following. An important challenge in defining a roadmap for policy action on education for societies is that different countries have very different starting points in terms of their education systems, their inclusion challenges, their material and political capacity to take action. What mechanisms do you think are necessary to overcome these challenges?
Thank you. First of all, I welcome very much that Club de Madrid has lifted education up on the top of the agenda with regard to shared societies. I don't believe that education will alone solve every challenges regarding shared societies, but I do believe that education is a key to reach this goal. And in this regard, I'm thinking of education along 2 tracks. The first track is that education is a means for development towards inclusive democracies and shared societies, because shared societies requires knowledge and skills. So with your education, you can contribute to develop a shared society. Without any education, it's very limited what you can do. It's obvious. But the other track is that education can also be used much more as a means in processes for peace, reconciliation, and inclusive democracies. A few words regarding track 1. Let me just remind us that it has been a great progress with regard to education for all, one of the Sustainable Development Goals, number 4. It has worked. Number of children without any education at all has been, over years, reduced from around 100 million to less than 50 million. That's great progress. But it's a problem that many of them drop out before they graduate. And still it's a long way to go to come down to 0 child without any education at all, which is the UN goal. UN is doing efforts. They have a special envoy. But more important, it is up to every government to implement this goal. But also individuals can contribute. I'm thinking especially of a young person whom I know, namely the Nobel laureate Malala. What she has done is unbelievable, in order especially to focus on the rights of the girls for education. I think when you challenge us to talk about how to implement the roadmap, we must be aware of that there are some groups that are lagging behind in accordance to statistics. Girls, still, there are fewer girls than boys who get education. We have to pay attention to that. That's also what Malala is doing. Second, children in conflict-ridden areas are lagging behind, of obvious reasons. We have to think more about how can we reach them. First of all, of course, how can we stop the conflicts? But second, how can we reach girls and boys to get education in that situation? And thirdly, we also know that handicapped children, especially in developing countries, are lagging behind when it comes to the right of education. So a roadmap for policy action on education for shared societies must be adjusted to the different challenges in different parts of the world. But some principles must be common. For instance, education for all and compulsory education should be free for everybody in every country. And that education should promote human dignity, human rights, equality, and democracy. With regard, few words with regard to the track 2, how to use education as a specific means for peace, reconciliation, and shared societies. Allow me to give an example from the work we are doing at the Oslo Center in this regard. In the conflict-ridden coast area of Kenya, we have contributed to establish what we call peace clubs at schools and at universities. And that means that we bring together students from different ethnic clans, which is a conflict dimension in that area, to talk about what do we have in common, how can we calm the tensions, how can we as young people deliver our wishes and demands to the authorities. They learn each other to know across these borders. And we use education to teach them, and we also use education to teach the leaders of these peace clubs, because they need special knowledge and skills, of course. We learn them about using dialogue, not confrontation, about reconciliation, about shared societies. And this is also in a way to prevent violent extremism, which is a problem in this area, and which is one of the three focus areas of the roadmap. So let me end up this first intervention by saying that I hope that recommendations coming out of the process now in Club de Madrid will be a contribution for education of shared societies. Thank you.
So would Mrs. Diogo be ready to take the microphone?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I would like to join my voice to the president of the Paris Club on congratulating the Gulbenkian Foundation and the government of Portugal and the other sponsors for this meeting that was very well organized, and also congratulate the interventions that were made by the academia and the leaders present in this conference room. I like roadmaps. I like roadmaps because the roadmaps bring many positions of the people to the same road and same direction. Brings the ones that are skeptical to a position where they have to know the agenda and analyze better and be more open-minded and be ready for the implementation. Brings those that are skeptical also to organize the agenda together with the others. And those that were indifferent to realize that there is an important agenda to be implemented in the country or in the world, and those that were enthusiastic to be prepared and ready to implement the agenda. And this happened not only in a global point of view, but also in the countries. When we organize a new agenda, because the leaders have to be always ahead of the rest of the people. When we have to implement a new agenda, we should not wait for everyone to realize the importance. We have to be capable of organizing the things in a way that the others can debate, participate, and then move to a different stage of understanding and start implementing. And I think we did in a very good manner. Part of this agenda was prepared by using pilot cases. We realized the importance of this agenda. We have a vision, and now we realize our mission as Paris Club. We are influential. We sometimes say that we are not, but in reality we are, in one or another sense. And we can influence the agenda in global arena and in our own countries. Some of us, when we don't talk in the country, say, what's going on? She's not saying anything. 2 years without saying anything. When we say something, they say, she's talking too much. She wants to come back. But that shows that they are concerned and they want to listen. They have to listen. And when they listen, they realize that things can be done in a different manner. So in one or another way, we are influential. And we are influential in our own countries, and we are influential in the global arena also. So when we say something, we can use each one of us in the different fora where we are working to influence the agenda of those different fora that we have. So this can be part of our roadmap as Paris Club in terms of implementing this very important agenda. From the previous panel, we had very good basis for the roadmap. And I think the difference between the stages where each country is, I think it is not a constraint. It is a challenge. And also, I think there's a beauty on it. Because to build a roadmap based in the countries to the same stage, with same people, with same culture, with same inclusion process, with everything equal, will be pointless. My father used to say that people need governments because they have difficult agendas. If they had no difficult agenda, they wouldn't need governments. They wouldn't need leaders. They'll do whatever they want to do. So I think to be in different stages, different conditions, different materials, different education systems, different inclusion challenges. And these inclusion challenges, they have different faces in each country. In my own country, Mozambique, we have the challenge of gender equity. We have the challenge of extremists coming from the northern part of the country, something that was not usual in Mozambique at all. We used to accept one another. I liked yesterday when someone said that the word tolerance, it's not so good when compared with the word acceptance. In Mozambique, we used to accept one another. But now we start learning about this phenomenon of extremism or non-tolerance, non-acceptance of one another. So in each country itself, there are differences. And that doesn't avoid the countries to embark in a common agenda as a country. In the contrary, it helps. It creates a dynamic. Because when we have differences among ourselves, we learn how to approach the other, so we have to know the other one. And when we know the other one, there's something additional. As Kim was saying the last panel, you have something additional in your own knowledge, in your own attitude, in your own value, to say, well, I know that he has this constraint, he has this perception, he has this basic culture about not accepting me. So what's going on? Why is like that? And I learned also that first of all, we have to accept the person before we accept his ideas. And this came from one teacher that I had from Brazil. When we had the central planned economy in Mozambique, and I was learning about how to implement the central planned economy, and he was teaching me in a very, very discreet and secret manner about the market economy, saying, you know, this central planned economy will go to nowhere. So when you grow up, at that time I was 23 years old, he said, when you grow up, you will realize, and in your country, you will have an market-oriented economy. And I think you'll be one of the people leading the process. So let me prepare you for that. So when we start learning different things and so on, means that you accept the others. So I think that we should not be afraid of starting at different points and different situations. What is important is the leadership role, is the political will of the country and the political will of the leaders. And when the political will is not there, I think we have a role to play also. We can start from the academia. Sometimes when I have new ideas, I accept sapiens, what you call, in Portuguese, aula de sapiência. And I launch this new idea, and it appears, and they start debating, and then we start influencing the society. So I think different countries and different standing points will be a fuel for us to do more and to do better and to get where we need to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And indeed, new challenges for Mozambique about shared societies and maybe shared resources. But Tunisia had a different set of challenges, and I understand that you use education to good effect. How would you like to contribute to this discussion, Mr. Juma?
Thank you. First of all, we do believe that the real wealth in any society or nation is the human resources. And the best way to develop the human resources is education, which is started with the family, but after the school and after with this continuous training and the values that they bring through the education in the society. In Tunisia, maybe to be concrete, I will go straight to the example of Tunisia to show how important is the education in creating a shared society. In the 15s, just after the independence, the Tunisian society was at 90% analphabet. So we have few graduate people, really few numbers that you can count them with the hand. And the decision, there was a clear vision, is to invest in education. The first budget in Tunisia after the independence, third of the budget was dedicated to education. When you see the situation 30 years and 40 years after, today, if we have a chance really in the future, is that we invested in education. It reduces a lot of things. It reduces the difference between genders. Yes, we decided at that time to have laws which are really revolutionary at that time to give the right to the women, but we succeeded to realize that through education. Today, 2/3 of the students are women. 2/3 of the students at the university are women. It's education who helps the society to balance the gender, and so to take advantage from a half of our society, even for the economic, not only for human rights, but even for the economic. We have twice active forces today, and twice leaders, and twice students, and twice workers that we have, and we did that through education. we reduced the difference. So when you have the school, we have the first generation, the school, at the same school, at the same university, you have people coming from each region. So we reduced a lot of exclusion, we reduced a lot of differences. But I can give you as well, in the opposite side, how when we make bad choice in education, how we can generate problems. You know, all of you, that we have a revolution. We had a revolution in 2011, and we were speaking about dictature. In my sense, the main blame to the previous regime, it was what was known is the freedom, the lack of freedom. But for my sense, is the mistake made in education. Why? I will explain to you. At one time, education was very important in Tunisia for the families, for the government. It was like a national agreement about the importance of education. Last year of the previous regime, the decision was taken to say, okay, we will use education now to manage people, use it politically. So the decision was taken to make all the people go to a graduate level. So it's no more a tool to develop skills, many skills, but to give, donner la joie, happiness, to give happiness to all the people, because it's important to be graduate. What did it mean? We produce a lot of graduated people without any jobs. And these people made the revolution. We forget. All of us, we think that the revolution was a kind of ideology or a big protest again. No. Really, it was made by these people who were frustrated because they have the same level that the others. They think they have the same level that the others, and they were expecting to be involved, I mean, in the society, included in the society, but with the education, which was supposed to be an inclusive an inclusive way for the people, we produce the exclusion. And in my sense, that's the real challenge that we have today, how to reform the education to become again the vehicle of the progress and the inclusion in Tunisia. So I think whatever the wealth we have, natural wealth, whatever the position of development for progress, the education steals the main thing to create a shared society.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Byrne, I think it's your turn now to give us your perspective about the obstacles to establishing shared society through
Thank you very much, and thanks very much indeed for inviting me to speak. I'm going to explain why it's a very therapeutic afternoon for me, and congratulations to Club de Madrid and its partners for organising today. This is one of the most important issues in politics in Britain, a country that is going through some degree of turbulence right now. And so we're looking forward to the roadmap that emerges from this. So I serve the most diverse community in our country, and I'm a member of a party that lost one of its members of parliament, Jo Cox, who was murdered on the streets of her constituency by a neo-Nazi 3 years ago. And when we look at the public domain in our country now, we see populism, extremism, recruitment towards violence now becoming turbocharged in the digital environment. So the topic which you have centre stage is something that I have struggled with for 4 or 5 years now, and for those of you who want the book-length version of those struggles, there it is, came out last year. And I want to just begin my remarks really by sharing with you the journey that I took, which has helped me think about the roadmap that we need in our country, and maybe there are some elements of that that you can benefit from. Generally, when we have a difficult problem like this, I round up a lot of constituents, a lot of faith leaders, a lot of our businesses, and put them in a room together to try and figure it out. And it was actually a radical Irish priest in my constituency who had just come back from Africa that gave me the framework for thinking about how we solve this problem. And he said, look, Liam, what is wrong with anger? Jesus was a radical. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a radical. Everything that we see as progress has been delivered not by people who were apathetic, but by people who were angry. What is wrong with anger? If you wipe out anger, you wipe out most sources of social justice. But the challenge, and this is the challenge that we share, is that people, particularly young people, get to a fork in the road. And one fork can lead to trying to achieve change through violence or through hate speech or even through voting for extremist parties. The other path can lead to peaceful politics, joining a political party, starting a protest movement, campaigning for legal change. I'm in politics because I wasn't satisfied with our country at the age of 15. I was angry about it and decided to do something about it by joining a political party and standing for office. And so the question that we share is, how do we all make sure that when our young people arrive at that fork in the road, they take the good path and not the bad path? And what we have found is that we need a fresh agenda for teaching what Aristotle called practical reason. We want people to be able to take the right decision with the right information in the right proportion when they reach that fork in the road. Now, when I was a government minister, I was the immigration minister in our country for a couple of years. I talked a lot about shared values, and I don't want to sort of burst the balloon, but actually I came to conclude over the last 5 years that that agenda is seriously limited. I find a conversation about virtue far more resonant than a conversation about values. And so at Birmingham University, we've helped set up the Centre for Character Education to develop the curriculum to help children understand virtues like compassion, like justice, like courage, like gratitude. It's that moral core that people need when they get it to the fork in the road, if they're to take a good decision and not a bad decision. Second, when we did workshops with young people, we found that they weren't very excited about an agenda of values. They felt like this was an old guy bringing along some baggage from the past and forcing it down their throat. What inspired them was a conversation not about values, but about ideals. Ideals are about the future. Ideals are something that inspire people. Ideals are something that young people feel they can contribute to. But the challenge we have in a diverse Europe, speaking from a European perspective, is to find what the philosopher John Rawls called the overlapping consensus between different ethical traditions. And actually that's the work that we've taken forward in the Council of Europe. We had a unanimous report passed just before the end of July, which basically sought to map the overlapping consensus between the European Convention on Human Rights and Islamic ideals. It was actually quite easy to put together, but we were surprised that that research had not been done so far. And then finally, obviously, we have to build resilience in a digital era. And so what we are finding most useful is a conversation about what is that bill of digital rights for the 21st century look like? How do we make sure that universal digital literacy is a human right for the 21st century? And that may be something that we want to get into. When we go into the House of Commons now, we have a shield on the wall behind us. Every member of Parliament who dies in active service is given a shield in the chamber of the House of Commons. And behind us, when we go in, we look at the coat of arms that was created for Jo Cox. In her maiden speech, Jo gave a speech that many of us almost know by heart, but the motto from that speech is now emblazoned on that coat of arms above us. 3 words: more in common. More in common. Those are the shared virtues and those are the shared ideals that we want to turn into action. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. So the mayor of Cascais is going to add this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for the kind invitation to be here in this panel. Manners, you have a very tough job today because with this panel of all politicians, so I will try to keep with the rule of law of 3 to 4 minutes.
You're doing very well.
I will try. So, as you know, unfortunately, shared societies remain at best as an idyllic, I would say, rather than a reality. That's the truth. And saying this, I would argue that the surging of more and more projects, more and more attempts, more political will to implement projects of shared societies throughout the world has made the need to define roadmaps for policy action in many governance areas, such as from energy to governance, to defense, to climate change, and of course, roadmap for policy action in education. And we could debate on which would be the most important one, which will be the most pressing one at this precise moment in our history. We could debate on that. But if the present is undoubtedly controversial, the future is as clear as it is urgent today. And we who bear the responsibility of decision making, we politicians, we leaders, we public servants, the bureaucracies, the so-called bureaucracies, we have been used this word future with an area this panel and this conference is deeply connected and linked to, and I'm talking about, of course, education. And for me, education is the weapon, the tool that we have at our disposal to assure an equity-based society where social mobility is a reality rather than a myth or a mere dream. Having education such an important role in our collective future as a society, and even more today when we know that the world is facing an unparalleled rhythm, pace of disruption in many areas, from technology to democracy, to energy, to climate change. But, and there's always a but, and the but here is that we cannot be naive or idealists. At such a point that we could not believe that all societies, all countries, all regions, all continents would have the same starting points for each and every challenge that we have to tackle. But if we politicians, we leaders, we public servants choose to accept the challenge and want to tackle these issues and to define a serious roadmap for policy action, in this case for education, we need to understand one thing first. And I think we all agree in this room on that, is that those differences can and should be leveled. But I think we have another thing that we have to agree here today in this room, is that it's absolutely impossible to erase them completely. I think these two starting points are very important for us this morning. And this is why, and answering your question, I believe that the first step should be to define a set of goals, a set of objectives to achieve in a finite time frame. In line to what Pedro Cunha in the previous panel just said, we need KPIs, we are humans. We need, in line to what we have done in climate change for the last 20 years or so. We have set as a humankind a set of goals and try to achieve those goals in a precise time frame, from Rio to Kyoto to Paris. We have done that previously. And then to let each and every country to reach at their own pace. And throughout that process of trying to reach those KPIs, reach those objectives, reach those goals, those differences that I've talked about will stand out. And it will be easier for us, politicians, easier for us, public servants, leaders, to find new ways, new creative ways to fix those differences, not just in a short-term or mid-term perspective, but fix them in a long-term perspective. And then our main task should be, and would be, I think so, because I'm an optimist, to guarantee that each and every country, each and every continent, each and every region will have the same tools, the minimum and necessary tools to reach at least the defined goals. And when such has been accomplished, we should promote more cohesion between them, prioritize those who took longer to achieve those goals, and most important in this globalized world that we are living right now is to try to share good practices between those countries, and in the end of the day achieve convergency. But always, and I'm just finishing my answer, but always with one thing in our minds. Those who failed to initially acknowledge the existence of those differences that we are talking about, they will never, never be able to sustain a sustainable progress in the future. And that's why we are in this room this morning talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm not sure how we're doing for time. I think overall we did rather well, but let me go to one more question that I would like you to give about a couple of minutes. And it's a question that is quite dear to my heart because I described the challenges we have when we publish a global report that we would like it to have national resonance and relevance. We are also discussing here about a global agenda. And sometimes these global agendas can be very lofty, very high level. How do you see the challenge of making such a global agenda relevant for policy reform? What can we do to make it truly useful for education policymakers? And I think it would be useful and helpful to follow the same sequence of speakers. So Mr. Bondovic perhaps could say something about this global to local divide.
Well, I do hope that Club de Madrid can contribute. And we have different means that we use to promote our causes. And to promote education for shared societies, we can use missions to several countries, as we do in other fields. We can ask for meetings with the political leaders and draw upon our experience, having been a leader. We can approach the UN and the Special Envoy, Gordon Brown. It is important that when we go to specific countries with the roadmap, we must adjust it to the situation in that country. We must learn our lesson before we go. We cannot come with the same roadmap to every country when the situation is very different from country to country. For instance, if we go to a country where handicapped children don't have access to education, we must focus on that, because that has to do with shared societies. If we go to a developing country where still girls are lagging behind with regard to access to education, we must adapt the roadmap to that. So if we have learned our lessons, if we have adapted, adjusted our roadmap to the situation in the specific countries, we can have an impact. What's the next?
Mr. Diogo.
Thank you very much. I think that Club Madrid has a very important role. First, because Club Madrid members are not anymore under pressure of 5 years mandate. They have a vision. And the vision does not depend on 1 or 2 days of my mandate. It depends on what the people really need. And I think this is a very important passport for us to say what we think is correct to be said. And I think that they are very well respected in the world, very well respected in the forums, like United Nations, African Union, European Union, and so on. And also the different places in the debate where we can influence. The second issue is that Club Madrid has this very important characteristic of not being the implementer, but being an organization that can talk with that specific interest of being the implementer. And this is very important for the countries. And it's important also for the education policymakers and implementers of the area of the education. And the Paris Club members are impartial. They can really talk to the different partners, different players in education, and the support to the countries and partners for development, multilaterals and bilateral partners of the different countries in the world. And I think this is a very important position that gives a privilege to the Paris Club members. And they are so diversified in their composition that can cover all the world and all the institutions that are relevant in this process. And I think our roadmap should be exactly that. How to be clear about what we think should be, and then open to the debates, to the different levels and forums and so on. Because our job is more to influence the mindsets. It's not executing, it's not implementing, but realize what's going on, have the sense of mission, clear vision about the future, and how to walk through that direction, and then recognize that each country is a specific reality, and then the policies can be discussed and mainstream, because education issue, and when we talk about education for shared society, we are talking about an agenda that should be mainstream, not vertical agenda in education. Thanks.
Mr. Joma.
Thank you. I think that we should know and be concrete. We cannot cover everything at Club de Madrid. We don't have the means. And I will tell you a story to show that we cannot. Last year, I set up a group to prepare the reforms of education in Tunisia. It's a group of experts coming from the administration, the people who are used to do that. But in parallel, I chose a group of students from the 25 F4 districts in Tunisia, so almost 15%, and I asked them to do the same. The results is quite different, and I want to tell you that I preferred the second group of students. So we have to pay attention, and we don't have this group here inside, so we know that we cannot cover everything. I think it's very important, and the group before, they showed a kind of roadmap with the principle and all the aspects that we have to cover. We in the Club de Madrid, we have some things which could be with a big added value. We have a group of leaders who were in the decision, who lived an experience, and from different countries, from different realities. And I think beside this roadmap, we have to find a way how to support the different countries in building their own vision and strategies. And mainly for a non-developed country or non-mature country with regard to this question, because sometimes I see that even though there is the decision, there is the volunteer to go ahead in investing in education, there is not a whole knowledge about what they have to do and the right anticipation on the future. So globally we can act like that. And the second thing is how to gather this experience, the best practices, the success story, and how to act, to transfer that from one side to another. I think that we are a unique group to do that. It's a unique ensemble, a group of experience that could that. And then we have to focus on some other aspects. Example, how to push on the international organization, international collaboration to intensify it, and how to push to find the funding for that, because as well it's a question of money. And the last point I will emphasize is the digital evolution. We have to avoid the digital fracture or the digital exclusion. It's a big mean to develop education. It's a big mean to accelerate, and we have to pay attention, and that's the result of the young group, that the way to administrate and the way to manage, the way to give the education is not the one that we think our generation, it's another way. And the main vector in that is the digital. We have a big job to do, to pay a big attention to that void in any society, this fracture, digital fracture, and among nations, this fracture. So I think we have to target some of the aspects and to focus on and to bring them. It's better than to have a global plan. Thank you.
I think there's three things that can be done that would be incredibly useful, and I think the way this is developed should very much complement something the World Bank did last week, which I think was helpful. So, the publication of the Human Capital Index, it's got its issues, but I think it will become a good tool for helping politicians in all countries mobilize the arguments that are needed often to take difficult decisions on tax, which are ultimately needed to get sustained investment in education and health systems. The first thing, I think, is that we could do an awful lot to ensure that there are universities developing good curricula and good teaching materials for character education. We've got good investments in some universities, but ultimately, the most important asset in this equation will be a teacher in a classroom. Making sure that teacher is well trained and has got good curriculum materials, that for me has got to be number one. Second, what young people in my constituency have taught me, I still visit a school every fortnight, is that sometimes the declarations can be important teaching tools. So in our city, we have enshrined the ideals that we share into a curriculum around the UN Declaration of Rights for the Child. So you can walk into any classroom now and you can see the UN Declaration of Rights on the Child. And I can see now a head boy and a head girl walk me around a school and tell me about why it's important that there's no outsiders in the school. These kids are 7 or 8. That's incredible. But it's driven from what was ultimately a declaration of shared ideals. And then third, I very much agree with the point about digital. I mean, I think a campaign around universal digital literacy is important because it brings parents into the equation. Often digital literacy amongst parents is much lower, and yet parents, as we know, are some of the most important teachers of children. But making sure that digital teaching materials are available around shared ideals, around virtues, making sure those assets are available is something that I think the Club de Madrid could actually mobilize quite quickly, because the tech lash that is now sweeping the world is something that tech companies are alarmed about, and they're looking for positive initiatives to show their social responsibility in return for the vast amounts of profits and the very little tax that they pay.
I will pick the Liam idea of winning the battle of ideas, and let me pick another idea of the speech of Liam about anger and about the moderates, because it's rather true that some prefer politics to policy, others prefer words to actions. And recently in Europe, that's my continent, we have been hearing a new kind of that dismission. Moderates on the center right, moderates on the center left, they seem eager to surrender their roles of agents of change and so their responsibilities as policymakers. And that's what we are experiencing right now in Europe. And I speak of Europe, of course, because of my proximity in terms of geopolitical proximity, but I could have chosen North America or South America. We are facing the same trend in North America and South America. But I pick Europe because I know better the case, and the European Union is just beginning the new cycle, electoral cycle, in next May 2019. And for the first time since the foundation of the European Union, maybe the moderates, the so-called moderates, the center-right and the center-left, will not have majority, a robust majority in the European Parliament. That's a reality that we have to face. And some of these moderates, some of these so-called moderates, they don't seem to mind at all. And that's the question that I would like to have an answer. And do you know why they don't seem to mind at all? Because they think that this populist wave that we are experiencing now in Europe will shake things up and will solve the entire problems, and Europe will find the new solutions and will change for good. I completely disagree with this positioning. Personally, as a moderate, as I consider myself a Democrat, an optimist, as I said before, I think this is rather irresponsible. And you ask me what we can do to turn ideas into action and ideas into real reforms in place from global to local. And I would say, answering your question, by not renouncing on our role as agents of change, moderates like ourselves, and by not surrendering our responsibilities to those who are promising the people that they have all the solutions, but they do not know how to achieve what they are promising people. So I think that's the answer, is for the moderates, a call for action to all the moderates in Europe to find a new way, new solutions for what we are facing on. Thank you.
Thank you. So it struck me as I was listening to you that at least 3 of your countries in the recent or not so anymore recent past have undergone through very interesting transitions. Mozambique, Portugal, Tunisia, most recently, that managed reasonably successfully to do these transitions that were needed in society. I remember Norway, how much the role it has played in helping transitions in other parts of the world through its foreign policy, which has been extremely interesting and painful at times. And we heard about the UK and the difficult period in which it enters now. Education has played a very important role. I was just reading this morning a survey in the UK in The Guardian about the UK and how polarized now the voters on either side of this divide are. And it was most interesting that the polarization was highest in terms of the location of the voters. And those who were closest to a university were actually much more likely to be on the, let's say, I would say, more moderate side at the moment. It's a reminder of how education really can play a role. And I think we'll leave it now for the last session to give us a few ideas on the way forward. Thank you very much.
So we will continue immediately with the closing remarks. So the speakers are invited to go to the stage.
Mude da mesa. 2 para... Traga.
Bienvenidos a esta sesión de clausura. Hablaré en español porque nuestro primer ponente, Felipe González, presidente del Gobierno de España de 1982 a 1996 y miembro del WLA-Club de Madrid, se dirigirá a nosotros en este idioma. Si alguien no tiene traducción simultánea en los cascos, por favor, búsquenlos ahora. Y es un placer para mí, un privilegio, darle la palabra al presidente González.
Bueno, pertenezco a la generación en el que el nivel de analfabetismo era por no hablar inglés, ahora es por no digitalizarse. Saludo a todos, empezando por la presidenta, que también yo fui su presidente en el informe sobre el futuro de Europa, ahora ya me preside desde el Club de Madrid. Verán, yo quiero hablarle del contexto del desafío educativo. Y la primera observación preliminar es que debemos considerar que vivimos un cambio de era, con una aceleración histórica nunca conocida antes. La revolución tecnológica que va desde la revolución de la comunicación entre los seres humanos, Internet, a la biotecnología y otros factores, están creando un proceso muy acelerado, mucho más que la condición del ser humano como ser histórico, de cambio profundo y rápido en nuestras sociedades. Y la educación tiene que responder a eso. Cuando yo llegué al gobierno, extendí el proceso educativo, la gratuidad, todo suponía igualar oportunidades y redistribuir el ingreso en la renta familiar. Hoy podemos hablar de la educación casi como hablamos de la sanidad, desde los 0 años de vida hasta el final de la vida. El proceso educativo tendrá que ser constante porque lo exigirá el cambio tecnológico en curso, esta revolución sobre la que cabalga lo que llamamos la globalización. Por tanto, primera consideración, nos sirve para todos en cualquier lugar del mundo. Tenemos que tener en cuenta este cambio de era, sobre todo para el siglo XXI. La mayoría hemos sido líderes políticos, entre comillas, del siglo XX. Por tanto, tenemos que ser capaces de conectar el mensaje con los desafíos del siglo XXI. Y sobre eso quiero hacer 4 breves consideraciones. Consideración número 1. Imaginemos desde el Renacimiento hasta ahora, la educación consistía en transmitir la mayor cantidad y la mejor calidad de conocimientos disponibles. En eso consistía el proceso educativo. En los primeros años de la vida creo que hay que educar ciudadanos. Hay que educar la comprensión, el conocimiento y la comprensión del otro para integrar la diversidad. El punto de encuentro de la diversidad de sentimientos de pertenencia es el paquete de derechos y obligaciones que podemos compartir más allá de las diferencias como ciudadanos. Por eso, insisto, educación para la ciudadanía. Pero el primer punto al que me refería era, hemos concebido la educación siempre como un proceso de transmisión de cantidad y de calidad, cuando era buena, de los conocimientos disponibles, que eran los conocimientos adquiridos. La revolución tecnológica, que entre otras crea una barrera de alfabetización o no, que es la barrera digital, de la que se ha hablado, y no insistiré porque se comprende fácilmente, pero la revolución tecnológica induce a una gran incertidumbre, que es que si lo que aprendemos hoy nos va a servir mañana. Y he dicho incertidumbre, pero no es incertidumbre. Lo único cierto es que la mayor parte de las cosas que vamos a aprender no nos van a servir mañana. Incluso que las que hemos aprendido ya no nos sirven hoy. Por tanto, como educamos para dar certidumbre, la única manera de dar certidumbre es entrenar a los jóvenes para la incertidumbre que les espera. Parece una contradicción, pero no lo es. Solo podemos enfrentar los desafíos del futuro, que debería ser el objetivo de una educación inclusiva, haciendo comprender la versatilidad, la flexibilidad del conocimiento. Y ahora tenemos a los profesores, algunos de ellos, como yo, relativamente analfabetos digitales, que se encuentran con niños que tienen una accesibilidad a lo digital, una especie de inteligencia digitalizada desde que nacen y crean una fractura, un choque, con miedo incluido. Por tanto, es más difícil educar a los profesores mayores en la digitalización que hacer acceder a los niños a esa digitalización. Entonces, ese es el primer desafío. Para algunas de nuestras culturas, y me refiero a aquella a la que pertenezco, además de transmitir cantidad y calidad de conocimiento, se nos olvida entrenar a los que reciben el conocimiento para transformar ese conocimiento en una oferta que le añada valor a sí mismo y añada valor a los demás. Educamos demasiado pasivamente en la transmisión de conocimiento y no entrenamos para transformar desde el primer momento el conocimiento en oferta que añada valor. Valor en el sentido machadiano, de Antonio Machado. Valor no en el sentido puramente material. Valor en el sentido profundo del término, capacidad de empatizar con el otro y de transmitir ese valor, no solo apropiárselo, sino de transmitirlo al entorno social. Por tanto, transmite conocimiento, entrena para transformar conocimiento en oferta. Tercer elemento, como he hablado de la velocidad de los cambios, preparar, transmitir conocimiento, entrenar, preparar para la incertidumbre es lo que más certidumbre dará. Siempre hemos educado a nuestros hijos, a nuestros jóvenes, para que tengan un mayor nivel de conocimiento y una mayor certidumbre para enfrentar los desafíos del futuro. Y ahora nos encontremos que los instrumentos del conocimiento transmitido no solo no dan certidumbre ante el futuro, sino que generan incertidumbre, porque lo único cierto es que lo que aprendemos hoy puede no ser útil para trabajar mañana o pasado mañana, y seguramente en muchos casos no será útil. Por tanto, como en la sanidad, hay que seguir educando y entrenando a lo largo de toda la vida. Pero hay algo en esta brevísima intervención sobre lo que quiero llamar la atención, y he oído algunas citas incluso de Aristóteles. Creemos que todo nuestro desafío es educar bien a los jóvenes para que accedan a las nuevas tecnologías, especialistas en cada una de esas tecnologías cuya obsolescencia será muy rápida por la velocidad de crucero del cambio. Pues bien, quiero decirles que el único elemento de certidumbre que podemos incorporar a nuestro sistema educativo es la formación humanística. Eso que hoy se desprecia en favor de la especialización técnica, de la fragilidad de la especialización técnica. La formación humanística, la literatura, la historia, la filosofía, el conocimiento de los clásicos de todas las culturas. Se cita a Aristóteles, podríamos citar a Confucio y a otros muchos. El conocimiento de la condición humana, que exige una aproximación a una formación humanística, repito, literaria, histórica, filosófica, etc., es lo único que nos dará certidumbre, porque no cambia la condición humana como cambia la tecnología, para orientarnos en el cambio tecnológico con una cierta capacidad. Se habló de la moderación, diré de centralidad, la centralidad de los valores del ser humano, de los valores que serán continuos. Eso que decía un autor colombiano con el que termino, no pierdan de vista que la palabra dura más que las piedras. Y cuando me entregaron en el Premio a la Democracia de Atenas hace año y medio las obras completas de Aristóteles, pensé, este teatro romano está ya en ruinas y desaparecerá a pesar de su belleza, y la palabra de Aristóteles permanecerá. Por tanto, eduquemos en la palabra, en el valor de la condición humana, que tiene mucho que ver con las humanidades, además de aportar toda la educación técnica que seamos capaces, toda la preparación para el empleo, para la integración en la sociedad, de que seamos capaces, y eduquemos en la aceptación del otro, no en la tolerancia arrogante de la otredad, sino en el conocimiento del otro para saber qué nos une y qué nos diferencia. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, presidente. It's a pleasure now to give the floor to Sergio Sintra, administrador of Santa Casa de Misericordia, one of the partners of this policy dialogue.
Muito boa tarde a todos, Sra. Presidente, Srs. Presidentes da República aqui presentes, Srs. Primeiros-Ministros, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. No dia de hoje comemoramos o Dia Internacional da Luta contra a Pobreza. Deve-nos lembrar que tal é um imperativo diário de todas as sociedades e não podemos aceitar que nenhum cidadão possa viver em condições que não permitam o exercício pleno da sua liberdade. Também não é demais relembrar que a Declaração Universal dos Direitos Humanos completa este ano 70 anos de vida. Numa altura em que ainda se vivem desafios crescentes, de modo a conseguir cumprir na íntegra os 30 artigos contidos neste extraordinário documento, temos que ter bem presente que esta declaração resistiu ao teste do tempo e é prova evidente da universalidade dos seus valores, como a liberdade, a igualdade, a justiça e a dignidade humana. Estes valores universais estão vertidos nos Objetivos da Agenda das Nações Unidas para o Desenvolvimento Sustentável 2030. Objetivos estes centrais para a construção de sociedades pacíficas, tolerantes, inclusivas e sustentáveis. A Santa Casa da Misericórdia de Lisboa, instituição com 520 anos, e sempre desde o seu início com a missão estatutária de melhorar o bem-estar das pessoas, sobretudo dos mais desprotegidos, abrangendo as suas prestações de ação social, a saúde, a educação, o ensino, a cultura e a promoção da qualidade de vida, é um stakeholder-chave na implementação de grande parte destes objetivos. Estes objetivos têm sido incorporados e reforçados nas várias iniciativas levadas a cabo pela Misericórdia de Lisboa. Quando digo que é um stakeholder-chave, não o digo hoje por ser um representante da instituição. Digo consciente do que representa para todos os lisboetas, para todos os portugueses e para todas as gerações que ao longo dos anos tocou. A mais-valia da Misericórdia de Lisboa reside na sua diversidade de áreas de atuação, na proximidade que tem com os públicos vulneráveis, desde a infância à idade adulta, e na capacidade de conjugar os recursos internos e externos à instituição para enfrentar o desafio da complexidade crescente das dinâmicas urbanas e dos novos problemas sociais que nos afligem. Ao longo destes 2 dias, fomos constatando como a educação é um instrumento central e poderoso para a formação, para fomentar a coesão social, nomeadamente por possibilitar o diálogo intercultural, o sentido de pertença e, fundamentalmente, o respeito pelo outro. Quando, em sociedades democráticas, ainda nos deparamos com alguns elementos de fragmentação social, devemos, por um lado, questionarmos de que forma as organizações da área da educação e o seu staff estão efetivamente envolvidos com esta missiva e conseguem promover a inovação e a criatividade nas suas formas de abordagem dos problemas. Por outro lado, devemos ter sempre presente que a multidimensionalidade dos problemas sociais exige a mobilização de políticas públicas de diferentes setores, sejam eles a educação, a saúde, a cultura e, fundamentalmente, a economia. Mas também a mobilização de modelos de co-governamentação que apelem à cooperação entre a administração central e local, os cidadãos e o conjunto de organizações públicas, privadas e do terceiro setor. Gostaria de focar a minha intervenção em 2 pontos que me parecem cruciais no mundo em que vivemos. Pelo menos em sociedades ocidentais, que se deparam com o envelhecimento acentuado da população e que ainda têm, simultaneamente, níveis de pobreza e desigualdades sociais acentuados. O primeiro destes pontos prende-se com o desafio, ou com os desafios que se colocam à prestação de cuidados a pessoas mais velhas, decorrentes das alterações demográficas. A maioria dos indicadores demográficos revela um aumento do número de pessoas com mais de 65 anos de idade e a Organização Mundial de Saúde estima que o número global de pessoas com mais de 65 anos, 60 e mais anos, será, em 2050, o dobro do que é atualmente. Hoje temos cerca de 900 milhões e em 2050 teremos 2 mil milhões. Em Portugal, a realidade não é diferente. E aparece Portugal, simultaneamente, como um dos países mais envelhecidos da União Europeia. Segundo os dados do nosso Instituto Nacional de Estatística, 20% da população portuguesa tem mais de 65 anos. E na cidade de Lisboa, 1/4, 25% dos seus habitantes já estão nesta faixa etária. A par desta dimensão, os portugueses, à semelhança de todos os outros, vivem em norma mais tempo. Em Portugal, a esperança de vida depois dos 65 anos é de 20 anos para as mulheres e 17 anos para os homens. Consciente desta realidade, a Misericórdia de Lisboa, juntamente com mais instituições, que são elas o Município de Lisboa, a Administração Regional de Saúde, a Polícia de Segurança Pública e a Segurança Social, lançou recentemente um programa que se intitula Lisboa, Cidade de Todas as Idades, que visa dar uma resposta integrada, qualificada e de proximidade através de um conjunto de medidas organizadas em torno de 3 eixos estratégicos: vida ativa, vida autónoma e vida apoiada. Centro-me apenas, neste momento, na qualificação do apoio domiciliário, que integra a vida autónoma. Uma medida que, para nós, preconiza efetivamente o aging in place, ou seja, defende a permanência das pessoas na sua habitação o maior tempo possível. Mas temos, obviamente, problemas. Temos problemas que, desde logo, estão subjacentes a quem consegue prestar essa prestação de serviço. E como conseguimos hoje, em sociedades ocidentais, que defendem a educação com outros patamares, simultaneamente recrutar em qualidade e quantidade os prestadores de cuidados no próprio domicílio. Independentemente de elementos conjunturais que poderão estar a reforçar uma redução da procura de oportunidades de trabalho na área da geriatria, temos de ter a consciência do seguinte: uma educação para a cidadania que reforce a importância do exercício de profissões socialmente úteis, pois hoje sabemos que não são estes dos cursos socialmente mais prestigiantes, mas temos a certeza absoluta que são os cursos mais necessários para a prestação dos cuidados a todos. E temos ainda a certeza que são aqueles cursos que garantem uma taxa de empregabilidade mais elevada nas sociedades do mundo ocidental. Necessitamos e temos a consciência de que é necessária uma educação para a cidadania, que reforce que todos, independentemente de sexo, raça, religião, idade, condição física, têm o direito a receber cuidados sociais e de saúde de qualidade. Inovar nas formas de qualificação e de integração de migrantes na sociedade portuguesa, da mesma forma que no mundo ocidental, é um dos desafios que temos. Hoje, cerca de 38% dos prestadores de cuidados ao domicílio não são originários de Portugal, são de outras nacionalidades. E a tendência acentua esta procura ou esta falta de resposta a nível nacional. Temos que apostar em modelos de recrutamento e de formação aliciantes para esta diversidade cultural. Mas temos que o enfrentar hoje de frente, porque se não o fizermos, amanhã iniciamos demasiado tarde todo o percurso. E somos nós todos que estão nesta sala que irão, de algum modo, sofrer com essa falta de ação que hoje não temos ou não iremos ter essa oportunidade de iniciar. Temos, simultaneamente, continuar a apostar nos processos de qualificação formal e não formal. Pois, apesar da melhoria global dos indicadores, nomeadamente ao nível do indicador da aprendizagem ao longo da vida, que em Portugal se destaca por ser um dos países da União Europeia em que mais aumentou este nível de qualificação. Temos, e sabemos que temos, ainda uma das taxas mais baixas da população que conclui o ensino secundário. E sem conseguirmos ultrapassar esta diferença em relação ao resto da Europa, temos necessariamente uma prestação de cuidados e uma evolução do ensino e da integração que não é a mais adequada. Por último, e como segundo ponto, gostaria de chamar a vossa atenção para algo que se prende com uma iniciativa que lançámos há meia dúzia de dias. Uma iniciativa que intitulámos como Casa de Impacto, que não é mais do que a união de diversos parceiros para, em conjunto, alavancarem a criação e desenvolvimento de soluções inovadoras para os problemas sociais. Temos como parceiros instituições tão distintas como o Governo Central e local, fundações, a banca, startups, escolas de negócios e uma entidade com elevado reconhecimento e investimento em negócios de impacto em Portugal. Procuramos fazer um encontro destes dois mundos, que normalmente estão de costas voltadas. O mundo das organizações sociais e o mundo do empreendedorismo. Pois a junção entre quem lida com os problemas no terreno e quem tem no seu ADN a inovação necessária para pensar na caixa é absolutamente fundamental. Hoje, e temos todos a certeza, ou pelo menos queremos entender que assim é, não basta pensar fora da caixa. Temos que, sim, criar novas caixas. Temos que criar novas caixas para enfrentar o desafio da complexidade crescente, das dinâmicas urbanas e dos velhos e dos novos problemas sociais, que, se não forem ultrapassados, todos nós teremos, obviamente, muita dificuldade em transmitir aos nossos filhos que não é só a parte digital, como há pouco o Sr. Presidente mencionou, que irá resolver os problemas. A parte humana e os princípios é fundamental em qualquer sociedade e este é um tempo de viragem para todos. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado. I would like to give the floor to Guilherme de Oliveira Martins, is the trustee of the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation, our host in these beautiful premises. Please.
Senhoras Presidentes, Senhores Presidentes, estamos de parabéns. We are very proud because of this discussion about the ideas we had during these days. A Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian honra-se de aqui ter lugar esta iniciativa. Corresponde, afinal, a uma lógica sequência de 62 anos de um trabalho persistente nos domínios das artes, da educação, da ciência, da filantropia. Nesse sentido, quando o presidente Felipe González aqui apelou ao princípio fundamental de uma educação para as pessoas, uma educação humanista, uma educação que nos permita preparar para a incerteza, fez, afinal, o ponto crucial, uma vez que o sucesso da agenda global para as sociedades partilhadas depende da qualidade da aprendizagem e de pormos as pessoas em primeiro lugar. Humberto Eco um dia disse-nos: se não aprendermos, poderemos durar 40, 50, 60, 70 anos a nossa vida física. Mas se soubermos aprender, viveremos pelo menos 6.000 anos, que é a idade da civilização. E temos que compreender isto. É exatamente a compreensão daquilo que são os clássicos, daquilo que é a compreensão dos instrumentos, de que a tecnologia é instrumental, mas que é das pedras vivas que devemos cuidar. Essas são as pedras que se mantêm. Essas são as pedras que prevalecem. Uma visão. Precisamos ter uma visão. E a visão é educação de qualidade para todos. Objetivo que a Unesco considera como o seu primeiro dos objetivos e que obriga a que o nosso roadmap não seja uniforme, que seja um roadmap adaptado a cada situação. É indispensável compreendermos que não há soluções uniformes em educação e que a qualidade e que os resultados positivos dependem da capacidade de nos adaptarmos. Educação e formação ao longo da vida. Desde os 0 anos até ao momento em que deixamos este mundo. A igualdade de oportunidades deve ser completada com a correção das desigualdades. Temos que compreender que este objetivo de pôr a educação no cerne das nossas preocupações é, afinal, pôr as pessoas. Falamos aqui de um triângulo. O triângulo escola, família, comunidade. E é indispensável compreendermos o papel que a escola, em articulação com a família e a comunidade, tem de desempenhar. A escola não pode estar sozinha. A educação não pode estar só. A educação tem de se articular permanentemente com o mundo da vida e as circunstâncias. E a educação das mulheres? A educação das mulheres é absolutamente fundamental. O primeiro país do mundo a erradicar o analfabetismo, que foi a Noruega, fê-lo porque terminou com o analfabetismo das mulheres. E em 2 gerações passou de 80% de analfabetismo para 0%, porque o filho ou a filha de uma mulher alfabetizada não será analfabeto. O medo do outro, do diferente. Eis porque temos que nos preparar para compreender que só há educação se nos pudermos pôr no lugar do outro. Só há diálogo se nos pusermos no lugar do outro. E ao pormos-nos no lugar do outro, percebemos, afinal, que cada um tem a sua dimensão própria. Cada um tem o seu papel específico que não pode deixar de estar presente. Importa, no diálogo entre culturas, sermos capazes, afinal, de assumir a diversidade. Não de assumir uma perspectiva em que a tolerância pressupõe a nossa superioridade relativamente aos outros. Não. Diferenciação. Respeito mútuo. Assim entenderemos a capacidade de pôr as pessoas, pôr as pedras vivas em primeiro lugar. As fundações, as organizações não governamentais, instituições como a Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian, são estatutária e perpetuamente instituições comprometidas com os valores da dignidade humana, com o respeito pela diversidade e pela diferença. A qualidade da democracia pressupõe a melhor participação dos cidadãos, determina que estejamos atentos relativamente àqueles que estão ao nosso lado, aos problemas que a cada passo se colocam, e ter melhores instituições. Instituições que sejam mediadoras, que sejam representativas, afinal, daquilo que os cidadãos sentem, que os cidadãos pensam. Só assim poremos, afinal, as ideias e a dignidade em primeiro lugar. Parabéns ao Clube de Madrid.
Until officially closing this policy dialogue, I would love to give the floor to Baira Bica Freiberga, former president of Latvia and president of the World Leadership Alliance, Club de Madrid.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an exciting few days together with you. And I'd like to start by thanking you all for the will to come here and participate in this policy dialogue. Thank you all for your patience in sticking through to the end. And thank you particularly for the ideas that you have brought and shared with us. The members of the Club de Madrid, whom you see here around you, are trying to use their convening power and their desire to work together to act as a sort of loudspeaker for certain ideas that are topical at the moment, that have taken on a particular importance or that have an importance that will never go away. We are not a founding body, we are not paid workers of the state as we were, after all, when we were in office. A president or a prime minister, after all, is working and paid by the taxpayers to do a certain job. We are now free men and women to do entirely as we wish, and we're using this freedom to support causes that we all hold dear, and many of us have been in the field of education, by the way, but a president or a prime minister in many ways has to be a teacher to their people. What we have seen here at this conference, and I wish to thank with all my heart, apart from the participants, the ones who have allowed it to happen, is the Gulbenkian Foundation and all the other sponsors and supporters of this event. I'd also like to express particular thanks to the Secretariat of the World Leadership Alliance Club de Madrid, its Secretary General, Maria Elena Aguero, and her staff. After all, we are the initiators of this event, and thank you, Maria Elena, and all the staff in Madrid for the very hard work you've done in linking up with the other institutions. And my thanks go to the leadership and to the also the workers in the Gulbenkian Foundation and others, the city of Lisbon, the city of Cascais, and all those who have contributed to this event happening. We have not started a greenfield institution here in talking about education. We're not building it up from the ground up. Education is something that's been around for a while, and there are international bodies, there are think tanks, there are policy institutions that have worked about it. What is happening here today, we have tried to make a synthesis of certain ideas that seem to us pertinent for overcoming certain dangerous barriers to this ideal, to this goal, to this dream of having shared societies across the world in spite of the inevitable differences that are part both of us as human beings and the differences in history in various parts of the world, the differences in climate, in resources, and everything you can think of. What we have seen here is, I think, a fair sample of the broad range of diversity, of challenges that are faced by different countries, particularly with respect, in this case, focusing on education. We heard about Somalia, where there are parts of the country, 80% illiteracy still. Now, this is something that in many parts of the world we think belongs to the past. But there are countries where literacy is still an issue. And this is the first priority, then, that has to be addressed. And while these countries are at it, of course, they should leapfrog the centuries of development that led other parts of the world to the digital revolution and become digitally literate at the same time as they're becoming literate. But literacy is a basic requirement for the modern world, and we cannot hope to have open, democratic, responsible, shared societies if they are populated by illiterates. We know that for most of its history, humanity has been illiterate and has done very well in its own way. But in the modern world, we can't turn back. We have to look forward, and technology, electronic information, the speed of it, as President Gonzalez has been pointing out, it will be with us. We cannot go back to oral societies. I, as a scholar of oral literature, I assure you that we cannot go back to oral societies. We have to go forward. The education that we have been talking about, I heard interesting ideas about what it should be or shouldn't. It seems to me as somebody who spent most of my life as an educator, that a fundamental body of knowledge should be as part of the equipment of every citizen in every society, no matter where in the world, and no matter how rich or how poor. Some would maybe contest this and say that just because this knowledge that you will acquire as a child will be obsolete, and President Gonzalez is precisely right that it will be obsolete. But this does not prevent us from the need of having children learn from the earliest age. Why? Because learning teaches you how to learn. You cannot adapt for the rest of your life to changing circumstances unless from the earliest age in your life you have started to learn, you have learned how to learn, you have learned how to acquire information. More than 50 years ago, experimental psychology had a mass of information about how learning to learn or transfer of training is a fundamental aspect of education. It is not so much the thing that you learn as such, but the fact that you did learn, that you, in a way, established programs in your brain and algorithms for acquiring, analyzing, synthesizing, and retaining and retrieving information from that portable computer that we all carry between our two ears. And I'd like to remind you that even in the age of digitalization, we should not be lured into a reliance on technology as being a replacement for the human being, for the presence of the teacher, for the role of the family, for the educational role of society, that we will only Google something or whatever the next company is going to be that will tell us the information. I know that in my country right now, if I wish to access the internet, there are parts when we drive through forests where we do not have access. Your iPhone, the battery might run down, and you lose contact. You may not be able to contact anybody. In an emergency, the computer you carry with you between the two ears will always be with you. As a refugee child, I remember being on a boat as we left the coast of Latvia behind us. I think the next to last boat that was not sunk by enemy torpedoes. And I was struck as a small child by how little people were carrying with them. They had what they had on their backs and what they could carry in their two hands. And I heard my parents commenting about it, what an equalizer it was, a social equalizer, to go into exile, because it didn't matter what position you had had earlier in your society or what possessions you had had. If a crisis comes where you have to leave everything behind, you realize that what you carry with you in your hands and in your head, those are your true possessions. Education is a way of enriching what a person carries with them everywhere and at all times, whether the phone has been loaded up with the electrical currents, or whether there is Wi-Fi access in the region where you are, and many parts of the world still are not connected. It is an inheritance that you have that is both from your formal education, from the informal education of your environment, and from contact, yes, with the cultural heritage of the world. I think that in many ways, the education that many of us have been receiving has necessarily focused on adjusting us to our future occupational skills in life. We still hear from many politicians that education should be reformed, that it's too vague, it will be out of date, therefore let us prepare them for jobs. And it is a fact that secondary and tertiary education in technological skills and in preparing for certain jobs is a necessity, and many countries do not have enough of it. We heard of the example of Tunisia, and in many ways my country has the same problem, that if you have too many masters of business administration, more of them than companies that can actually make use of them. If a country has too many lawyers, and I would recommend your reading a novel by John Grisham called The Rooster Bar, a rather dysphoric novel, I might say, but that explains how a program where the government is giving loans to students so that they can acquire a legal education, how horribly it can go wrong and not achieve the goals that you're really planning to have. So that the guidelines that we're giving here are signposts to development. This is not a world government body. It is not even the United Nations. We are giving suggestions from the consensus arrived at in interaction between former leaders, current experts, and current agents of change in many countries. The fact that we're former leaders doesn't mean that we're idle. The very fact that we're here present is one of the signs of it. But apart from this sort of conference, we heard from Chandrika and from others, President Sampaio, about concrete projects. And most of us are involved in a series of concrete projects that we are doing and executing. But the experts we have here have been generous with their sharing their thoughts and their conclusions. And we wish to continue this dialogue. We have had a policy dialogue here, and I think I would encourage all of us as we go home to be inspired what we heard here and to continue both our reflections about what education means and how to go about it, about how to convince decision makers, both in politics and in business and in general society, about how to change policies, but in general, to spread the concepts and the ideals that we have been developing here and to put them into the public space, because ideas are what initiates and justifies and stimulates action. There was a Canadian writer by the name of Stephen Leacock who had a parody of an action novel where there's a scene of a very active hero, and the phrase goes like this: he rushed out and jumped on his horse and rode off in all directions. So being ready to jump on your horse and to go into ready for action, I think it helps if you do have a goal in mind as to where you're going, and if you have a roadmap how to get there, a general roadmap. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for helping us to try and trace out that roadmap, and I wish you bon voyage in continuing on that way. I hereby declare this policy dialogue officially closed.
For all of you that would like to join us for lunch, it will be served in the third floor, en la tercera planta. Thank you.